was the day 4 people died because of a lollipop. It happened in the middle of the town square, at noon, under a clear blue sky. They chewed the candy, smiled for a brief second, and then collapsed, their bodies stiff, their eyes wide open as if they had seen something unbearable. The crowd screamed, but nobody could explain why it had happened. Nobody except the boy who had handed them the candy. He was only 10 years old, and when their bodies hit the cobblestones, he was smiling. His name was Diego Pereira. San was the kind of town most maps forgot. Hidden 40 kilometers outside Buenos Aires. Surrounded by fields of dry soil and the shadow of a forest that people refused to speak about. It lived in the tension between ordinary life and unspeakable secrets. The population never rose beyond 4,000. Families worked the land, sold goods in small stores, and sent their children to the crumbling schoolhouse. On the surface, it was quiet, maybe even peaceful. But anyone who stayed longer than a week noticed the silence that pressed on the streets. The way curtains closed when strangers walked past. The way even the dogs lowered their heads instead of barking. San did not welcome outsiders. The town carried a long history of strange deaths. Generations had whispered about fathers who suddenly went mad and killed themselves without reason. Mothers found in impossible states of decay. Children vanishing as though swallowed by the air. A man once threw himself from the grain silo, shouting that something was chasing him. His scream ended when he hit the earth, but his neighbors swore the echo of his cry lingered in the fields for days. A woman was discovered, turned to ash inside her kitchen, though her stove was cold. A schoolboy told his class that the forest had been calling his name. The next morning he was gone, and nobody dared say his name again. Every family carried scars, but none heavier than the Pereiras. Ernesto, the father, was known for his drinking, his violent temper, and his disappearances into the forest. He would vanish for nights, sometimes weeks, returning home with eyes that looked hollow, as if he had left something of himself among the trees. His wife had died long ago, her cause of death still debated in whispers. Some said she had taken her own life, others believed Ernesto had killed her. Nobody knew for certain, and nobody asked too many questions. Their children were marked from the start. Camila, 13, pale and silent, spent her days sketching endless drawings. Not flowers or animals or anything a girl her age might have drawn, but trees with mouths, roots that coiled like snakes, faces pressed into the bark, and human figures with empty eyes standing beneath twisted branches. She filled notebooks with these visions, and sometimes the drawings appeared on the walls of their house. As if the paper had not been enough to contain what she saw. Diego was different. He wandered through town with sticky fingers, always holding candy. Lollipops, gum, chocolate. But no one ever saw him eat it. His smile unsettled people. His grin seemed too sharp, his teeth too white. Some swore they heard him muttering to himself, as if repeating words from a voice no one else could hear. When the 4 people died from his candy, the town whispered the conclusion they had feared for years. Diego was not just a child. He was something else. The people of San feared the forest most of all. A narrow stream called El marked its border. Parents told their children never to cross it. They grew up knowing the rule: cross the stream, and you would not return. Hunters who entered were later found in pieces, their blood drained as if the soil itself had drunk it. Truck drivers who lost their way never reappeared. The mist that clung to the tree line was never still. Everyone knew the forest was not empty. Patterns revealed themselves, slowly. Every death, every disappearance, every madness, struck at the same time. 11:11. Clocks froze, radios cut out, animals fell silent. Some called it coincidence. Others whispered it was the mark of something older than the town. Something that had lived in the soil before the first settlers built their homes. During that single minute, parents clutched their children close, shops locked their doors, and the whole town seemed to hold its breath. Sometimes nothing happened. Sometimes the silence was broken the next day by screams or funerals. The Lollipop deaths had struck at 11:11. After that, San lived under a heavier shadow. People lowered their eyes when Diego walked past. They crossed the street when Camila appeared. They whispered that the siblings were no longer children of San but messengers of the forest. And yet nobody dared confront them. To act against them felt dangerous, as though unseen eyes watched from the trees, ready to punish anyone who interfered. Old records in the church spoke of the first settlers. They described a tree worshipped in fear, a tree said to feed on those who rested in its shade. The settlers had tried to burn it, but fire bent away from its trunk. They had tried to cut it down, but axes dulled against its bark. Lightning struck it again and again through the decades, but the tree never fell. Each time, its roots spread wider, reaching closer to the town. The Pereira children seemed bound to that same tree. Camilla's drawings became darker, showing the town square flooded with roots, bodies tangled in branches, Diego at the center, holding his candy. Diego's lollipops began to appear in places where people vanished. On a table, on a windowsill, in the hand of a corpse. Always sticky, sometimes wrapped, sometimes already licked. Always red. The night San truly changed began with silence. It was late, and the town was asleep, but windows rattled, though no wind blew. Dogs whimpered and crawled under beds. At exactly 11:11, every clock stopped. The air carried the smell of burnt sugar, sickly sweet, so strong that it made people gag. Those who dared to look outside saw children standing in the streets, dozens of them. They were pale, their movements stiff, and each held a lollipop glowing faintly in the dark. Their eyes were black, and they did not blink. At the center stood Diego, his grin wider than ever, as if the town itself was his toy. When morning came, doors were open, beds empty, meals still warm. Entire families had vanished without sound or struggle. No blood, no signs of escape. Just absence. The only clue left behind was a lollipop, placed neatly somewhere it could not be missed. Sen never recovered. People stopped asking questions. They survived by pretending nothing had happened. But deep inside, everyone knew the truth. The forest had spread its roots into the town, and the Pereira children were its voice. Every day, people prayed the clock would skip 11:11. Every day, they hoped the knock would not come at their door. And when the minute arrived, silence consumed everything, heavier than death. Because in San, survival was not about running, not about praying. It was about never being chosen. And once the forest chose you, there was nothing left but the taste of sugar on your tongue.